My sister's boyfriend mocked my code at her birthday dinner. Then I exposed his firm's IP theft. Hi, I'm Micah, 33, and 2 months ago my sister's boyfriend mocked my code at her birthday dinner, and accidentally exposed that his firm was trying to steal it. Northrest House was the kind of place with crystal glassware, a waitlist longer than most marriages, and menus that didn't print prices because if you had to ask, you didn't belong. My dad, Charles, had been bragging about getting a reservation there for weeks. He wanted Riley's 29th birthday to look like a magazine spread. She wore a dress that screamed influencer, even though she only had 100 followers and half were bots. Trent, her boyfriend, sat beside her like a man auditioning for GQ, slick suit, louder than necessary voice, and a Rolex that caught the candlelight just so. When I walked in, Dad waved me over with the enthusiasm of someone trying to seat the waiter, not their son. I was 10 minutes early. Still late by their standards. Micah, he said, loud enough to turn heads. Glad you could finally make it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, taking my seat. I ordered coffee, because I like having a bill I can actually pay. Trent was already holding court bragging about his firm, their aggressive expansion, the kind of disruption that usually meant layoffs for someone else. Real business, he said, swirling his wine. It's about risk, not comfort. Right, Charles? Dad nodded like a bobblehead. That's what I keep saying about Micah. Maybe if you spent less time tinkering with little projects. I smiled. Polite. Tight. I'd heard it all before. Riley leaned in. You could learn a lot from Trent, you know. He's really making moves. Oh? I said. What kind of moves? Trent grinned. We're building a new fraud detection system. Probably similar to the stuff you play with. What's yours called again? Pulse Logic, I said, setting my fork down. He laughed. That one. Cute little side project. My firm's been reviewing it. Honestly? We could rebuild it in a week. Everyone laughed. Mom, Dad, Riley. Like it was all so charming. Like I was the weird cousin showing off a card trick at a wedding. You need longer than that, I said calmly. Trent tilted his head. Why's that? Because you need my permission. Pulse Logic is mine. Every line of it. And your firm's already under NDA for the demo. The silence hit like a brick dropped in soup. Even the waiter froze. Trent blinked. You're saying you own Pulse Logic? I'm confirming it, I replied. Patent pending. Licensing signed last quarter. 7 figures. Mom dropped her fork. Dad tried to recover. Let's not turn this into a business debate. It's Riley's birthday. You wanted risky, Dad? I said. That's $7 million worth of risk. But you didn't see it because I didn't yell loud enough. I folded my napkin, placed it neatly by my plate. Happy birthday, Riley, I said. Then I flagged the waiter, paid for my coffee, and left. No one followed. I didn't feel triumphant when I got home. No music, no punching the air. Just a soft, steady stillness. I hung my jacket by the door, turned on the desk lamp, and opened my laptop like I always did. Pulse Logic's dashboard glowed on the screen, clean, humming, efficient. Still catching fraud across thousands of real-time data streams without a hiccup. That dinner played on a loop in my head, not because it hurt I'd grown past that, but because of how quick they were to laugh. Like that moment was rehearsed. Like the script was always, Micah builds something, Trent belittles it, everyone applauds. They didn't know I'd sold Pulse Logic's global license to How Bridge Analytics 3 months earlier. They didn't know I walked away from a 6-figure job to build it. Or that I'd lived off rice, code, and borrowed Wi-Fi in a windowless sublet to get it right. They just knew it wasn't flashy. See, in my family, success means suits and confident lies. My father talks about networking like it's a religion. My mom treats Instagram like says moral currency. And Riley? Riley's been the star since kindergarten. I was the background, the fixer. The one who reset the router, edited essays, paid for her broken phone with graduation money I never spent. They don't know I filed the Pulse Logic patent under a shell company, Northlake Systems, on purpose. Not to hide, but to be underestimated. 2 years ago, I started coding the engine after a consulting firm I worked for missed internal fraud in 3 different clients. Not because the data wasn't there, but because no one was smart enough or willing to catch it. I built a script. Then a model. Then an ecosystem. The demo ran on a read-only VM. Every login started with an NDA splash screen. Every click got logged. If you pushed past the sandbox, the system bookmarked it. Trent's firm, Virex Consulting, had requested access 6 months ago. They never responded to the follow-up call. But the server logs told a different story. I opened the archived access logs. There they were. Virex IPs crawling through my demo backend like ants. Querying endpoints past the scope. Deliberate. Systematic. Like someone trying to reverse engineer a car by dismantling the mirrors. There was also one flagged event, a session recorded because someone tried to run unauthorized commands. That file had sat forgotten in a folder labeled Insurance. I clicked it. Up popped grainy conference room footage. Trent, jacket off, sleeves rolled, pointing at a screen while 2 engineers typed. His voice clear. Look, it's just logic trees. Once we replicate the flow, we change the names, and we're golden. One engineer. But it's under NDA. That's illegal. Trent didn't blink. Legal's job is to argue. Ours is to move. I paused the video. I wasn't surprised. But I was done being quiet. I packaged the file, the logs, and the NDA agreement into a secure email. Subject: Violation of Demo NDA, Virex Consulting. To Hal Bridge Analytics Legal Department. CC, Personal Attorney. Short message. No drama. Attached: Evidence of breach and attempted IP theft. Requesting review per licensing clause 14b. I hit send. Then I sat back, looked at the paused framed Trent mid-smirk and whispered. Execution's easy when you don't build anything. I closed the laptop. And smiled for real this time. 3 days later, my phone exploded. Not with congratulations. Not with offers. With a group chat notification titled, Family Dinner Follow-Up. First message was from my mom. You embarrassed Riley in front of everyone. That was her night. Second was from Dad. You had to make it about you. As usual. You could have handled it with class. Riley's came last. A flurry of dramatic, short lines like she was giving a TED talk on emotional betrayal. You humiliated Trent. You humiliated me. This was the first guy I've ever brought home that they approved of. You just had to ruin it. I finally find someone who sees my worth, and you tear him down. You always find a way to ruin what's good for me. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of them would land where they needed to. My family wasn't looking for truth. They were looking for spin. For a way to patch the story back together where I stayed the weird, bitter brother who never quite measured up. I'd played that role long enough. Later that night, I logged into my old demos server one more time. Just curiosity, I told myself. But really? I wanted to see it. There, under a folder titled Session Flags Security Escalations, sat a video I'd forgotten I even saved. Timestamp, 6 months ago. File name, Virex_conference room_extracted. Movie. I clicked play. Trent again. Same posture. Same smirk. He was standing beside a whiteboard, outlining PulseLogic's structure like it was his own. This piece here, he said, pointing to my architecture, is where their fraud trigger kicks in. We'll reroute the data stream, tweak the inputs, and nobody'll know. One of the engineers glanced nervously at the camera. But we're still in the trial window, right? This could kill the deal. Trent. No, the deal's a formality. We'll say we went in a different direction. Then we release our version and beat them to market. The clip ended with him sipping from a mug like a guy who thought stealing intellectual property was just savvy business. I didn't flinch this time. I simply forwarded the file to Halbridge's legal counsel again, this time with a short message. Supplemental evidence if needed. Timestamped and watermarked. Confirming attempted IP theft during demo phase. All activity logged. Less than an hour later, a response came in. Thank you, Mr. Levine. Our compliance team has initiated a formal investigation. You will be updated within 48 hours. Please do not contact Virex or any of its employees directly during the process. Good. Let the system work. That's what PulseLogic was built for. I closed my inbox and went for a walk. There's a kind of peace that comes with knowing you're done asking for fairness. You stop explaining. Stop softening your edges to fit other people's comfort. That night, I slept like the server. Steady. Unbothered. Recording everything. The email came on a Thursday. Subject: Immediate action taken, Virex licensing breach. I was sitting in my kitchen, reheating last night's stir-fry, half watching a documentary about deep-sea cables. The kind of background noise I usually needed to drown out my own thoughts. Not this time. The body of the email was short, professional, and ice-cold. Effective immediately, Halbridge Holdings has terminated all licensing negotiations with Virex Consulting and escalated the matter to legal. Mr. Trent Ryerson's employment has been suspended pending further investigation. Thank you for your diligence in protecting company IP. Margot Ellis, VP, Legal Affairs, Halbridge Holdings. I reread it twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it said everything I didn't need to explain. Trent wasn't just under fire. He was out. Silenced by the very system he thought he could bend. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. No victory lap. Instead, I opened my personal records folder and archived every piece of the incident emails, demo logs, contracts, the screen recording, even a PDF copy of that birthday dinner receipt. Not for revenge. For precision. For history. The fallout hit faster than I expected. By Friday, LinkedIn was buzzing. Virex scrubbed Trent from their leadership page. Their CTO put out a bland, damage-controlled post. We remain committed to innovation, integrity, and compliance with all partnership agreements. Which, translated from corporate, meant, we got caught. Please don't sue us. But the truly surreal part? My mom's phone call. Micah, honey, she said in that forced bright tone she used when pretending everything was fine. Riley's having a hard time. You know how emotional she gets. I was silent. She continued, I just think, maybe next time, talk to us before going nuclear. This affected more people than just you. I almost laughed. Someone tried to steal my work, Mom. I'm not saying that was right. She rushed. But calling lawyers, making it public, was that really necessary? Yes, I said. It was. She huffed. You're so dramatic sometimes. I learn from the best. She hung up. I stared at the silent phone screen. For once, I didn't feel guilt dragging itself up my spine. I didn't feel that ache to smooth it over. I just felt done. A few hours later, Riley texted. Not an apology. Not even acknowledgement. You humiliated me. In front of everyone. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. I blocked the number. That weekend I finally did something I hadn't done in months. I left town. Just me, a weekend bag, my laptop, and a small cabin in the woods with spotty Wi-Fi and perfect quiet. And there, between cups of burnt coffee and pine-scented air, I started writing the first chapter of something new. Not just software. Not just protection. A system that doesn't just catch fraud, but rewrites how companies protect creators. A framework for ownership enforcement, built from the ruins of the one they tried to break into. Trent thought execution was everything. But he forgot the one rule I built Pulse Logic around. You can't execute what you don't understand. 2 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail, thick, cream-colored, obnoxiously formal. The return address was my parents'. Inside was an invitation. Gold foil. Embossed lettering. A small gold wax seal I could only assume Riley had insisted on. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Riley Hart and Trent Ryerson. Crestline Country Club. Saturday. Black tie. Family photos at 7 p.m. I laughed. Once. Loud enough to startle myself. Not because it was funny, but because it was so on brand I couldn't even be mad. After everything, after Trent tried to reverse engineer my work, after he lost his job, after my parents blamed me for it, they were still throwing a party like it was a fairy tale ending. I flipped the card over. In the corner, handwritten in my mother's script. We really hope you can come. Let's put the past behind us. Put the past behind us. I stared at the phrase until it blurred. That night, I sat at my desk and reopened the folder labeled Pulse Logic Legal. I clicked through every document again. The logs. The session footage. The cease and desist letter Halbridge had already served to Virex. The incident was resolved, airtight, and archived. And still, they were throwing a party like none of it had happened. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just curious. Curious how far they'd go to polish the picture. To edit me out of it if I didn't cooperate. The next morning, my phone rang. My father. I let it ring 5 times before picking up. Micah, he said. I assume you got the invitation. I did. We really hope you'll come. It's important. For Riley. I didn't answer. He continued. We want to move forward. No more tension. Just family. You mean no more consequences? I said. He paused. This isn't about consequences. It's about unity. Unity built on pretending nothing happened. Micah, he sighed. You've made your point. Can't we just celebrate something for once? I could hear it in his voice. The desperation wasn't for Riley. It was for control. For optics. For peace that cost nothing from them and everything from me. I hung up without replying. Then I opened a fresh document and started outlining something I hadn't thought I'd ever need. Not a revenge plan. A presentation. If they wanted me to show up, I'd show up. And I'd bring slides. A week later, I RSVP'd yes. Not because I wanted to go. But because if they wanted a picture-perfect moment, I was going to give them the whole frame. Unfiltered. The Crestline Country Club looked exactly like the kind of place that offered legacy memberships and judged your shoes at the door. Polished floors, soft jazz playing over hidden speakers, and a foyer big enough to land a helicopter in if you bribed the right manager. The air smelled like money and anxiety. I arrived alone. Dark charcoal suit, clean-shaven, no tie. Just formal enough to say I'm here, just casual enough to say I didn't come to play by your rules. The hostess smiled like I was already behind schedule. She pointed me toward the ballroom with one of those tight-lipped country club smirks. Inside, it was exactly what I expected: golden light, linen tablecloths, a champagne tower no one needed, and people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly pretending we were old friends. Dad was by the bar, laughing too loudly. Mom flitted between tables like she was running for mayor. Riley stood near the center, in a white satin dress that looked more bridal than engagement, her hand laced through Trent's arm like she was holding on to a retirement plan. And Trent? He was glowing. Not like someone in love. Like someone who'd successfully buried the scandal that nearly ruined him. Until tonight. I kept to the edges, sipping a club soda, watching them pose for photos under a banner that said, Riley plus Trent, building the future together. Irony, apparently, wasn't on the guest list. About 20 minutes in, Riley saw me and made a beeline across the floor. Micah, she said, all warmth and practiced forgiveness. I didn't think you'd actually come. Neither did I said, sipping my drink. I'm glad you did, she added. It means a lot to Mom and Dad. Did they tell you why I RSVP'd? She blinked. To support your sister? No, I said. To confirm the truth. Before she could reply, someone tapped a microphone. The background jazz cut off. Lights dimmed just slightly. Dad stepped up to the podium with that same salesman smile he'd used since I was 5 and in trouble for coloring on a tax return. I just want to thank everyone for being here. He began. Tonight isn't just a celebration of Riley and Trent's engagement. It's a celebration of resilience, growth, and putting the past behind us. I smiled into my glass. And then Trent stepped forward. This has been a year of transformation, he said, with the confidence of a man who had clearly practiced this line in the mirror. And I'm proud to say that the next chapter of our firm is already underway. We've secured new funding, new partnerships, and yes, a brand new fraud detection system that's going to redefine the industry. I didn't move. I just stepped slightly forward, into the spotlight's fringe, and said 2 words loud enough to carry. Pulse logic, right? Dead silence. Every face turned. Trent's expression froze. He forced a laugh, but it cracked under the lights. Micah. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I said, pulling a small USB drive from my jacket pocket and walking slowly toward the stage. Since you're discussing my system in public, I figured I'd contribute. His eyes darted to my parents. My mom's lips parted. My dad's jaw set. I handed the drive to the DJ, whose only sin was being in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Just play the video file, I said calmly. No edits. The screen behind them, previously rotating through photo slides of Riley and Trent on boats and rooftops, flickered, then went black. Then a low-resolution video began to play. A conference room. Fluorescent lighting. 3 people. One of them Trent standing at a whiteboard, pointing at my code on a projection screen. His voice came through the speakers, crisp and damning. The algorithm's straightforward. Replicate the logic, rename the parameters, tweak the UI, and it's ours. The demo's got limited access, but we can get around that. The room went completely still. On screen, one of the engineers spoke. But this is under NDA, That's illegal. Trent. Legal's for the lawyers. We're just exploring. The audio stopped. The projector screen went black. Nobody moved. A few glasses clinked softly as people set them down, suddenly unsure if they were still at a party or a deposition. I stepped up to the mic, adjusted it once, and said, "That was recorded 6 months ago. During a demo session of my software, Pulse Logic. The system is fully patented, and the license is owned exclusively by Bridge Analytics. Virex Consulting, which Trent represented, violated the terms of their NDA to attempt theft of intellectual property." I scanned the room. For those of you wondering, I added, Bridge took action. Terminated the deal. Investigated the breach. Trent was suspended. Trent tried to speak, but the sound that came out wasn't a sentence, it was a wheeze in a silk tie. And just so we're clear, I continued, I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came here because you invited me. Because you wanted a family photo. So let's get one, just make sure the caption reads, "Integrity not included." I stepped off the stage and walked through the ballroom. No applause. Just silence and stares. Mom didn't look at me. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Riley stood frozen, tears starting to form, her perfectly curled hair trembling. And Trent? He sat down. Because there was nowhere left to stand. The moment I walked out of that ballroom, the air felt like it belonged to me again. Not heavy, not reactive, just clean. Behind me, the country club was a painting cracking down the middle. But outside, the world didn't end. It didn't even pause. The valet guy handed me my keys without a word. The night sky stretched out in front of me like it had been waiting. I drove home with the windows cracked. The radio was off. I didn't need noise to feel victorious. By the time I stepped into my apartment, my phone was already vibrating like it was trying to escape the counter. 3 missed calls from my mother. 5 from Riley. 1 from an unknown number I suspected was Trent, calling from a burner phone like this was some kind of corporate spy movie. Then the messages started rolling in. Riley. What the hell is wrong with you? You ruined everything. People were recording. I hope you're happy. Dad. This was a private family event. Not a courtroom. You humiliated your sister. You could have handled this discreetly. Mom. Micah. Please. Come over tomorrow. Let's fix this. You are not being fair. Fair? That word. That word. It nearly made me laugh again. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened the Pulse Logic admin panel. Not to distract myself. To remind myself why this all happened. Why I wasn't going to crawl back into the hole they'd spent my entire life politely shoving me into. The dashboard pulsed green, efficient, active. Bridge had already deployed the system across 4 of their client firms. Real-time transaction monitoring, predictive flagging, human behavior patterning. Thousands of data streams. Millions of dollars protected. And that wasn't all. There was a new notification at the top of the screen. New partnership inquiry, sent by Eastbridge Capital Group. I clicked it open. A high-level director asking if I'd consider licensing Pulse Logic to their compliance division. Their email included phrases like, long-term potential, industry-defining solution, and confidential pilot rollout. I sat back. It wasn't just working. It was multiplying. I glanced at my phone again, buzzing with one final Riley message. Why do you hate me so much? And it hit me, she really believed that was the story. That I was jealous. That I was cruel. That I had shown the video to get revenge. No. I hadn't done it for her. Or for Trent. Or for my parents. I'd done it for me. For the kid who taught himself Python on a second-hand laptop. For the intern who got his ideas laughed off in every meeting until someone else claimed them. For every version of myself who stayed quiet because I thought the only way to survive a family like mine was to disappear. That version was dead now. And in his place stood a man who'd built something no dinner table insult could shrink. I turned my phone over, screen down. I opened a new document. Titled it, Next Build, Foundry Protocol. A project I'd been sketching for months. A full suite infrastructure for creator-owned tools. Smart contracts for licensing. Intrusion detection tied to legal pre-alerts. Something to make sure no one else got gaslit out of ownership ever again. I worked until 3 a.m., without noticing. At some point, I got up, poured myself a glass of cold water, and stood by the window watching the city breathe under amber streetlights. Somewhere out there, Trent was probably scrambling to salvage what was left of his career. Riley was rewriting her engagement story into a tragedy. My parents were likely spinning a new narrative for anyone who'd listen. But inside this apartment? Silence. Truth. And a version of myself I didn't have to hide anymore. I wasn't looking for applause. I was just finally okay with being seen. 3 days passed before I heard from any of them again. Not a call this time, a knock. I opened the door to find my father standing there in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore, flanked by my mother in her Sunday scarf, arms crossed tight like a gate. Their expressions were the same ones they wore at Riley's first piano recital when she forgot the second verse, worried, polished, and furious that anyone else might have noticed. "We need to talk," Dad said, already stepping inside like it was still his home. "No, you want to talk," I said, not moving. "Big difference." Mom forced a smile. "Micah, this has gone too far." "No," I said. "Trent trying to steal my work went too far. Me showing proof? That's just punctuation." They stood in the middle of my living room, looking absurd against a backdrop of mismatched bookshelves and a $60 IKEA couch that still tilted slightly left. "We're here because we're trying to fix things," Dad said, voice low and composed. "You made a scene." "You mean I made a point?" I said, walking past them to the kitchen. "You want coffee or just control?" He didn't answer. Mom sat carefully on the edge of the armrest like even she knew she didn't belong there. "Do you know what people are saying?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Because they saw the video. Not a rumor. Not a headline. A recording. His own words. The truth." "That's not the point," she began. "Then what is the point, Mom? That I embarrass you? That your friend circle is talking? That the narrative cracked a little too close to the surface?" Dad stepped in. "You don't understand what you've done. You've made Riley look." I raised my hand. Not loudly. Just enough to stop the sentence in its tracks. "You want to talk about what I did?" I asked, grabbing my laptop from the table and opening the PulseLogic folder. I flipped it toward them and let the screen run, logs, signatures, system breach notices. Then I pulled up the demo video again and played just the first 20 seconds. Trent's voice filled the room. "Replicate the logic, rename the parameters, and it's ours." My parents' faces didn't change. Not in shock. Not in apology. Just calculation. Dad looked down. Mom closed her eyes. They weren't here to understand. They were here to reset. "I got an email from Crestline yesterday," I said, "asking for a refund on the deposit." "Apparently you put it on my name?" Mather answered. "It's fine," I continued. "I already canceled the card. So if you're here to smooth things over, you're going to need a different target." "Micah." Mom tried again, softer now. "This is your family." "No," I said. "You are my family." "But that party? That speech?" "That was a press conference for Riley's fantasy. I just showed the audience the backstage." Silence. Then Dad looked up and said it. The thing I knew was coming, but still landed like a stray elbow to the ribs. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I do. It's the same chip I coded PulseLogic with. The same one that got me a patent, a licensing deal, and 6 more partnership offers in 2 months. You think it's a flaw? It's a feature." Mom stood. "We just want peace." "No," I said. "You want quiet. There's a difference." I walked to the door and opened it. "You don't get to define who I am just because you never tried to understand me. You wanted a son who played the game. I became the guy who wrote the rules." Dad opened his mouth. I shook my head. "Don't. This is the last time we're having this conversation." They walked out without a word. Not dramatic. Not slamming doors. Just retreat. I stood there for a long moment, then closed the door and leaned against it. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just still. That night, I got a new message from an old friend, a former professor who'd once told me, "The world doesn't need more startups. It needs more builders who give a damn. Saw what happened? Been following your work. We've got an open lecturer slot at the university. Guest position. No pressure. You'd be a great fit." I stared at the message. Me. The background kid. The invisible one. The one they never clapped for. Not just building something. Now, teaching others how to. I replied with 2 words. I'm in. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, letting the quiet in fully, completely, for the first time in my life. It didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt earned. 2 weeks after that final doorstep standoff, I stood on a small stage at Eastbridge University, watching a sea of undergrads scribble notes, while I explained the anatomy of digital fraud detection. No blazer. No podium. Just me, a plain black t-shirt, and a slide behind me that read, "Fraud isn't a glitch. It's a pattern waiting to be seen." After years of being told my work was a hobby, a phase, a cute little side project, I was standing in front of 100 students who actually wanted to hear how I built it. Not for clout. Not for inheritance. But because they wanted to understand the craft. I was halfway through a live code breakdown when I saw her. Second row, third seat from the left, Elena Vega. We went to high school together. Back then, I was the invisible one who fixed the AV equipment during morning announcements. She was student council, top of her class, and kind in a way that didn't feel forced. After the lecture, she approached me. "I don't know if you remember me." "I do," I said before she finished. "You used to draw dragons in the margins of your calc notes." She laughed. "God. You really do remember." We talked for an hour in the hallway, and then 3 more over coffee at the campus cafe. She was teaching ethics in data systems. Left a 6-figure job at a firm that ethically adjusted numbers for private clients. Said it made her skin crawl. "You ever realize the system was broken and you stayed anyway?" she asked, sipping something herbal with cinnamon in it. "Yeah," I said. "I stayed too long at a dinner table that only served respect when you wore the right kind of smile." She tilted her head. "You left though. Most people don't." I shrugged. "I didn't leave. I built the exit." We kept talking. Through the week. Then another. Then dinners, walks, weekend classes. She showed me how to teach without condescending. I showed her the dev side of moral decisions. She asked good questions. I gave honest answers. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was explaining my worth. Just sharing it. Then, one Saturday morning, while we were mapping out a joint seminar on bias and algorithmic data, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. One line. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Riley." I stared at it for a long time. It didn't come with a demand. No photo. No guilt trip. No performance. Just 7 words. Years too late. But real. I didn't know if it meant she finally saw what I'd spent years trying to prove. Or if life had simply humbled her in the way public exposure tends to do. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. Later that evening, I found myself digging through the PulseLogic archives, not out of paranoia, but nostalgia. I opened the original folder labeled V001 Micah_only, and found the very first sketch I'd drawn of the system, a jagged decision tree with arrows going in 5 directions and a single note underneath. Make it catch liars before people get hurt. That was always the point. Not code. Not money. Not clout. Protection. From people like Trent. From companies like Virex. From families who only listen when you break the silence with undeniable evidence. That week, I signed a new partnership. Eastbridge wanted to integrate PulseLogic into their internal systems for academic fraud monitoring. Small pilot, yes, but it meant something. I used part of the money to buy a proper desk. The rest? I sent to a grant fund Elena had been building for underrepresented students in STEM. In honor of the kids who didn't get the whiteboard. No credit. No announcement. Just impact. That Sunday, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that still said "World's Quietest Genius." A gag gift from a college friend who probably didn't realize how prophetic it was. Inside, my laptop buzzed with activity. PulseLogic. Foundry Protocol. 3 consulting requests. A workshop invitation in London. A student email that read, "Your class changed how I see the world." I thought I had to shout to be heard. Turns out I just needed to say something worth listening to. I smiled. Not because it fed my ego, but because it reminded me the work had finally become louder than the noise. And that was the only volume I ever needed. The morning I submitted my resignation to PulseLogic's licensing board, it felt less like quitting and more like handing off a torch I'd been carrying too long. The product didn't need me anymore, not really. It had outgrown me, just like I'd hoped. Hal Bridge had the infrastructure. The contracts were airtight. My name was on every file, every clause, every patent. My exit wasn't an escape. It was evolution. A week later, I stood in the middle of my apartment surrounded by boxes that weren't packed with loss, but possibility. A folded hoodie. 2 well-worn notebooks. A plane ticket taped to the fridge, departure, Seoul. One way. It had been sitting there for a month, untouched. A joke at first. Then a maybe. Now, inevitable. No goodbye party. No dramatic post. Just a simple message to a handful of people I respected. Thank you for believing in the work, even before anyone else did. Jordan replied with a meme of a rocket ship. Elena sent a playlist titled Micah's Peace Era. The university posted a small goodbye on their site. Lecturer Levine departs to pursue global work in data ethics. That was more than enough. The night before I left, I went for a final walk through the city. Past the cafe where I wrote my first algorithm on a napkin. The old apartment building where I'd borrowed Wi-Fi from the laundromat below. The rooftop where Riley once said, "Why don't you just get a real job?" She never apologized for that. And I'd stopped needing her to. Some wounds don't get clean, they just scar and get stronger. Back home, I stood in front of the one object I'd kept untouched since it all began. A pinboard. At the top, a printed copy of the NDA transform violated. Underneath it, the session screenshot. My PulseLogic patent approval. A tiny faded receipt from the night I first registered my shell company. And, at the very center, the last thing I'd pinned up. A quote. They thought silence was consent. It was calibration. I pulled it all down, one by one. Not to erase the past, but to make room. I packed it in a flat folder, tucked it into the last slot of my carry-on, and double-checked the contents of my laptop bag. Everything else was digital. Secure. Stored across redundant cloud backups and encrypted hardware. Even PulseLogic source code versioned, archived, self-defending. I'd built it to last longer than me. And it would. On the flight, I didn't sleep. I stared out the window at clouds that looked like fresh paper. When we landed, Seoul was alive with noise and neon. I took a deep breath at the gate, walked through customs with a clean passport and no attachments. Checked into a rented studio with a desk that faced a window instead of a wall. Set my laptop down. Booted up. No emails from my family. No messages from Riley. And for the first time in years, I didn't check for either. Instead, I opened a new project folder. Blank. Untitled. Glowing softly in the dark. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then typed. Build something worth protecting. Then protect it from everything that tries to steal your name from it. I hit save. Not to share. Not yet. This one was for me. Soul was a hum, not a roar. That's the first thing I noticed. Back home, noise always demanded your attention: horns, headlines, heated dinner tables that felt like deposition hearings. Here, the chaos felt coordinated. Sidewalks moved like clockwork. Subway trains whispered past like breath. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the need to defend my quiet. The city just let me be. I settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for running along the Han River, earbuds in, water on my left, stillness on my right. Afternoons were deep work sessions from my rented studio, debugging a new risk assessment engine for a Hong Kong client. Nights, I taught virtual workshops, data privacy for human rights orgs, algorithm bias seminars for underfunded grad programs, PulseLogic-style detection theory stripped down for nonprofits that couldn't afford the enterprise license. The work was better here. Not because the tools changed, but because I had. One night, in a rooftop cafe in Itaewon, I sat across from a small group of university students after a guest talk. They were sharp, hungry, and too polite to say what I saw in their eyes. Why the hell did you leave the machine you built? So I told them. Because I built PulseLogic to catch liars. But staying meant becoming one. They stared, quiet. And then one of them asked the question I hadn't said out loud in months. Do you regret it? I paused, stirring coffee that didn't need stirring. Only the part where I stayed quiet for so long. The rest? No. I don't regret building something I died to protect. Later that night, back in my studio, I stared at the project folder titled Foundry Protocol. It had grown beyond theory. I'd quietly partnered with 2 other developers, one from Nairobi, the other from Munich. We were building a decentralized registry for system IP attribution. Timestamped contributions, zero trust verification, smart flagging on unauthorized forks. Not just anti-theft. Prevention. And I didn't need Pulse Logic to do it. That was the irony. The more I let go of the thing that started it all, the more I realized I didn't need it as proof. The world had already shifted. I was no longer someone who built a thing once. I was someone who builds. It was late when the email came in. Subject line: Speaking Opportunity, Global Integrity, and Data Ethics Summit. The sender was a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Margot Ellis. The HAL Bridge VP who'd handled the Pulse Logic case. She was now chairing a global consortium on ethical frameworks in enterprise tech. She wrote, "I've followed your transition. What you're doing now is precisely what this industry needs. We'd be honored to have you open the summit in San Francisco this fall. Theme: Designing for Defense. Let me know if you're interested." I sat there for a long time, reading it 3 times. Then again, but slower. It wasn't the summit. It was the full circle. From that dinner table with the fake compliments and 2 shiny wine glasses, to the city where no one asked me to shrink, to a world now asking me to lead. I responded with 2 words. I'm in. Then I shoved my laptop, stepped onto my balcony, and looked out over Seoul's blinking skyline. I didn't need applause. Didn't need closure. Just this. A life that was finally my own, measured not by who clapped, but by what I could quietly, consistently build. San Francisco. 3 years since that dinner. 2 since I walked out. 1 since I moved halfway across the world and stopped answering questions I no longer owed anyone answers to. The summit was held in a glass high-rise overlooking the bay. Inside there were banners with words like resilience and transparency and a long, sleek hallway lined with framed profiles of innovators who changed the game. I wasn't nervous. Not because I felt invincible, but because I'd already lost everything that used to keep me afraid. The MC introduced me simply. Micah Levine, founder of Pulse Logic and co-creator of Foundry Protocol. A voice the world underestimated. Applause. I stepped on stage with no slides, no props. Just the mic. 3 years ago, I began. Someone tried to steal something I built. Not because they needed it, but because they thought I wouldn't fight for it. The room went still. They thought silence meant weakness. That modesty meant permission. That if you do your work quietly, someone louder owns the right to claim it. I let that sit. But truth isn't loud. It's steady. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits patiently until someone's arrogant enough to step into the light without checking who cast the shadow. Murmurs. One woman near the front nodded, sharp and slow. I didn't win because I shouted. I won because I documented. Because I built guardrails as carefully as I wrote code. Because I knew one day, someone would test the system. I paused. No script. Just memory. And when they did, I didn't burn the house down. Beat. I changed the locks. Laughter. The kind that cracks tension. I ended with one line. If your work is honest, let it speak. If it's stolen, let the facts scream louder than revenge ever could. Standing ovation. Afterward, someone tapped my shoulder. Riley. Hair darker. Eyes softer. No camera in hand. She didn't speak. Just handed me a photo. The one from the engagement party, cropped. Only me in the frame. Looks better this way, she whispered. For the first time, I believed her. As I left the stage, badge swinging lightly against my chest, a young man stopped me near the elevators. Early 20s. Nervous. I built something, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It's not big, but it works. I looked at him, really looked. Shaky hands, fire in his eyes. I recognized the version of me he didn't know he was carrying. I didn't offer advice. Just a simple truth. If it works, it's already big. He nodded like I'd handed him a passport. He stepped back, shoulders straighter. I stepped into the elevator, doors closing slow. San Francisco blurred behind me. The past was loud once. Now it didn't echo. On the flight home, I opened a fresh doc. No title. Just one line. Quiet doesn't mean small. It means sharp. I hit save. Smiled. Closed the laptop. Let the clouds carry me forward.